Hi, I'm James from Chaosium. I sat down with David Larkins, who is the line editor for Pendragon, and I asked him to give a brief introduction into what exactly Pendragon is. This video is tailored for people who want to learn about Pendragon. Maybe they're looking for a new tabletop role-playing game, or maybe they're just curious about one of the most influential games in the genre. I'll jump across to the interview in just a moment, but first, remember to subscribe to the Chaosium YouTube channel. It helps us out, and it lets us make more content like this. Thanks.
So Pendragon is the game of Arthurian fantasy. It is a game in which the default character type is a knight. In fact, 90% of the time, you're going to be playing a knight. There are going to be rules for other types of characters, but it really does focus on that experience of being a knight in a medieval setting, and specifically the setting of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. So it's not a strictly historical game by any means, but it does evoke that feeling. So for folks who like their fantasy to have a little bit of that more kind of like folkloric feel to it, the foes that you'll face tend to be human, but when they're not, they're fairies or giants or dragons and that sort of thing. It's very foundational stuff, and there's an emphasis on chivalry and honor, aspiring to that. Really, the what I like to say is the core Pendragon experience is like, yes, everybody plays knights, but the point of playing the game is to answer the question, what kind of knight are you? Because some knights are better than others. And so the mechanics of the game really drive that. Pendragon, when it first came out, introduced the concept of traits and passions. And so traits are these paired personality descriptors. So like energetic and lazy, merciful and cruel. And, the more you are of one, the less you are of the other. And once they start getting up to really high levels, if you're like notably lazy, that's going to be a problem for you a lot of the time, right? Other times, if it's lower, if they're more like equal, they're just kind of guides for role playing. Like you kind of say, oh, I wonder if I'm up before the dawn today. Let me roll my energetic and see, And so over time, the way you play your character and the way the dice rolls come up tends to drive those traits, one way or the other. And the passions likewise are personality descriptors. You have loyalties, you have loves, you have hates, your honor, of course. Chivalry is a passion. How committed are you to the tenets of chivalry? So you can use those to boost your abilities. For folks who have played RuneQuest, it's like invoking a rune or a passion. You can use those to augment your skills. But Pendragon itself is kind of it is in the BRP family for folks who've played any other BRP games, but it's BRP divided by 5 because it's all on a D20 instead of a D100. The skill list is very short. The game just uses one D20 and a little handful of D6 for your damage. That's about it. It's really easy to get into, and surprisingly deep once you're in it. It's one of those like really easy to learn and pick up, but then once you start playing it, you're like, whoa, there is so much here, because there's a whole other part of the game that you don't have to do, but a lot of folks do, which is the sort of multi-generational dynastic part of the game. You start off playing your first character, you get married, you have kids, you basically are running this noble household, and you want to, ensure that success down the line. And then eventually, you might end up playing your kid once they're of age and they've become a knight. And so it's not unusual if you're playing a very long form campaign to play through 3 generations of characters. And there's very little that compares to that in role playing, honestly.
So obviously the game is in the BRP family, like you said, which means it has some similarities to Call of Cthulhu and to RuneQuest. And you've talked about the narrative, which is folkloric, which I think is a great term. It's epic. You're in the court of King Arthur, for people who still want to learn some of the kind of basic storytelling elements, I have two questions. The first is, you're playing in the court of King Arthur. Does this mean that you are following the story of King Arthur through? Are the adventures that you're having, are they kind of linked to that? The second question, when you get time to answer it, is where does Pendragon fit in the tabletop role-playing game space in regards to, how much combat there is, how much role-playing there is, how much focus you have on kind of the more detailed mechanics versus just improvisation and invoking these interesting people?
So I could do the second question first, actually. The way the mechanics work in Pendragon is it's a very interesting balance, right? Because you're, like I said, the traits and passions really drive the action there, but unless they're like notably high, you're not compelled by them, right? So a lot of folks, with the lower traits, they just use those as a guideline for role playing. So there's an interesting like conversation between role playing and game mechanics going on in any game of Pendragon, including like really unexpected results. In my current game that I'm running, one of the characters, his player was just rolling fumbles all the time. I've never seen anything like it, and he ended up with kind of discovering his character's personality through those just epic screw ups. He was driven to melancholy, he was driven to madness multiple times. There was a lady he was courting who he insulted because he just lost his sense of self and sort of snapped at her in a melancholic fit. It creates these moments that people talk about for years afterwards because they're so unexpected. I think I think in other games it's like, well, this is how I'm going to play my character. Pendragon does allow space for that, but at the same time, you have to be a little flexible in terms of like, whoa, that was unexpected, I didn't see that coming. It's almost like the character is asserting their own personality, and you have to kind of get to know them, which is very interesting. So that feeds into your first question, which is in the setting overall. So how to put it, the Arthurian mythos, one of the reasons why it's so enduring is because it's always been very accommodating to like new stories being told. Here's a story of Sir Gawain, here's a story of Tristan and Isolde, here's of course obviously Lancelot. Lancelot was kind of a late insert so to speak, right? Like he wasn't in the earliest stories, and then French troubadours kind of came up with him, put him in there. So the way I like to look at it with Pendragon is any given campaign or even one shot, your characters are the stars of this particular story from the Arthurian cycle, right? So you have the other characters as background, and the players can kind of guide how they want to approach that. Like maybe they distrust Merlin and they have a hate passion for him, even perhaps, and that's going to affect how they interact with him, and then therefore how they interact with King Arthur, right? Who trusts Merlin. Or they might befriend Sir Gawain, and like he becomes a fast ally, but he also like kind of pulls them into his blood feuds that he and his brothers get into. And suddenly the player knights are like, hey, this isn't my fight, but they're sort of honor bound to help their friend. So the characters from the canon can be present to whatever degree the game master and the players want. I found that players actually really enjoy sort of finding themselves in these like famous scenes, right? Like being present for the drawing of the sword from the stone, or like being a founding member of the Round Table or something. So because there is a certain level of like cultural background information, like most people, you say King Arthur and the Round Table, they're like, oh right, yeah, sure, and a lot of folks then have a few other sprinklings of, knowledge of the various stories. They've seen a couple movies, what have you. So there's this kind of baked in relevance and resonance, really.
If I'm coming into Pendragon and I want to know what the kind of experience that I'm going to have is, if you could sum it up in a few words, who is this game for? What is the vibe that I'm going to get from it? What's the kind of fun that I'm going to have?
Oh boy. So the overall vibe is legendary, right? It feels like you are in a legend and you are writing that legend as it plays out. You're perhaps borrowing from other legends, but that's how legends get made. And then the overall experience is one that is, as I say, it's going to be surprising. It's going to serve up a lot of unexpected moments that are going to hit surprisingly hard. In the same way, like, so Call of Cthulhu, for example, you play Call of Cthulhu to get scared. You want to evoke some emotions when you play Call of Cthulhu. Pendragon is the same way, except you're not playing to get scared. You're playing to create these sort of legendary moments that are going to just, resonate not just in that session, but then, for, however long afterwards. I still have, like, some of the campaigns I ran 10 years ago, some of the villains from that campaign, my players still talk about, like, as if they were a real person, So it's immersive, I guess would be the word I'm looking for there. It's an immersive game experience. And the world of Pendragon is this very interesting synthesis of history, medieval romances, Victorian Arthurian tales, and modern as well. So there's a little, you can tease out those various aspects in whatever way is most interesting to you, even as a player, and just sort of participate in crafting a new version of the Arthurian saga.